Keltie Byrne. Remember that name, because before she became a symbol, a cautionary tale, she was a young woman brimming with potential. A marine biology student at the University of Victoria. Keltie wasn't just hitting the books, she lived for the ocean. She practically vibrated with a love for marine life, a deep-seated passion for understanding and protecting the creatures of the deep. Sharks, seals, sea otters, she was fascinated by them all. But it was the orcas, the majestic apex predators of the sea, that truly captured her imagination. Imagine her excitement. Then, when she landed a part-time job at OceanLand of the Pacific. This wasn't just a paycheck, it was a dream come true. A chance to work hands-on with the very animals she dedicated her studies to. OceanLand, nestled in the picturesque waters of British Columbia, wasn't the sprawling spectacle of a SeaWorld. It was smaller, more intimate. A floating marine park that offered a close-up experience with these incredible creatures. The year is the 1980s. The world is different. Understanding of orcas are based on old science. For Keltie, the initial days at OceanLand were pure magic. She learned the routines, the hand signals, the intricate dance of communication that formed the bond between trainer and orca. She helped prepare their meals, meticulously measuring out the fish and vitamins. She participated in training sessions, marveling at the intelligence and responsiveness of these ocean giants. She brushed their teeth, carefully inspected their skin, and whispered words of encouragement and praise. And who wouldn't be captivated? The sheer size and power of these animals, combined with their playful nature and apparent eagerness to interact, was undeniably alluring. Working alongside these creatures, sharing those moments of connection, it felt like Keltie was part of something truly special. She saw intelligence, playfulness, and what she believed to be genuine affection. She truly believed she was enriching their lives, providing them with stimulation and care in a confined environment. But the reality, as we know, was far more complex, far more insidious. Because beneath the surface, both literally and figuratively, a storm was brewing. OceanLand, despite its idyllic setting, was a far cry from the orcas' natural habitat. The tank, a floating pen in the Pacific, was cramped, offering limited space for these highly intelligent, highly mobile creatures to swim and exercise. Imagine being confined to a bathtub your entire life. That's the scale of the reduction in their world. Let's talk about the orcas themselves, because they're key to understanding the tragedy that was about to unfold. There was Haida to A, dominant female, taken from the wild. Wild-caught orca still suffer in this environment. Nootka the fourth, another female with a troubled past, having suffered failed pregnancies in captivity. And then there was Tilikum. Tilikum, his story is particularly heartbreaking. He was captured from the wild near Iceland at just 2 years old, ripped away from his family pod, his entire social structure, and thrust into the alien world of captivity. He was the youngest, the most submissive, and the one who would bear the brunt of the other orcas' pent-up frustration, because that's the ugly truth about orca captivity. It breeds aggression. Confined to a small space, denied the vastness of the ocean, the complex social structures of their pods, and the natural behaviors they were born to exhibit, these magnificent animals become stressed, frustrated, and, yes, even dangerous. At OceanLand, that aggression manifested itself in brutal ways, particularly during the night. You see, at night, the orcas were confined to a smaller, darker enclosure, a metal module where they had virtually no room to move. In this claustrophobic space, Haida II and Nootka IV would often turn on Tilikum, raking their teeth along his body, leaving deep, bloody gashes, brutal displays of dominance fueled by the stress of confinement. These weren't isolated incidents. They were a nightly occurrence. Tilikum had to hide from the other two to survive. Kait, bless her heart, was largely unaware of the full extent of this nighttime aggression. She saw the scratches, the rake, marks, but she was told they were the result of playful jostling, minor disagreements within the pod. The truth, the dark reality of what was happening inside that cramped enclosure, was deliberately downplayed by Sealand management. Orcas never hurt each other in the wild, and that's where the real horror of this story begins to take shape. Because Kait, in her genuine love and dedication, was unknowingly interacting with animals who were suffering immensely. Animals whose natural instincts were being warped and twisted by captivity. She was a kind, caring presence in their lives, but her kindness couldn't undo the fundamental wrong of their confinement. She couldn't erase the trauma of their capture, the frustration of their limited space, or the deep-seated rage that was simmering beneath the surface. Kait never knew this was happening until it was too late. Sealand, for all its outward charm, was a powder keg waiting to explode. The management prioritized profit over animal welfare, ignoring the warning signs, downplaying the aggression, and maintaining a dangerously lax safety protocol. The trainers, many of them young and inexperienced, were essentially left to navigate a complex and potentially lethal situation with limited training and support. Kait, in her naivete, believed she was making a difference. She believed she was helping these orcas live fulfilling lives in captivity. But in reality, she was walking a tightrope, blissfully unaware of the precipice below. She loved them, and they, in their own complex way, likely recognized her kindness. But love, in this twisted environment, wasn't enough. It couldn't overcome the years of captivity, the pent-up frustration, and the primal instincts that were about to erupt in the most horrific way imaginable. It was February 20th, 1991, a day that began like any other at Sealand of the Pacific, nestled in the frigid waters off the coast of British Columbia. The Orcas, Tilikum, Haida II, and Nootka IV had just finished a routine performance, the splashy finale echoing through the small park. The applause faded as the audience, unaware of the simmering tension beneath the surface, began to disperse. Kait Byrne, ever the dedicated trainer, was preparing to feed the whales. She walked along the narrow ledge that encircled the pool, her movements practiced, almost rhythmic. But tragedy can strike in the most mundane moments. A patch of algae, a stray splash of water, something made the concrete slick. Kait lost her footing, a gasp, a flailing of arms, and then the unthinkable. Kait Byrne, a champion swimmer, a woman who knew these waters, plunged into the deep, icy tank. For a split second, there was no panic. Kait had fallen in before. She was an expert in the water. She knew the drills. She'd be fine, but this time, something was different. As she surfaced, sputtering and reaching for the edge, a dark shape surged beneath her. Tilikum, the massive, 6-ton male. In an instant that would be forever etched in the memories of those who witnessed it, he seized Kait's foot. The world seemed to slow as he pulled her down. Her scream abruptly silenced by the icy water, chaos erupted. Staff members, paralyzed by disbelief, scrambled into action. Shouts echoed across the pool as they frantically slapped the water, desperately, trying to distract the orcas. But the playful facade had vanished. The creatures in the tank were no longer performing. The script had been ripped up. They were predators now, and Keltie was trapped in their domain. She surfaced again, her face contorted in fear, gasping for air. She reached, pleaded, clawed at the slippery concrete, trying to pull herself out. But a relentless tug dragged her back down into the murky depths. The whales weren't letting her go. What followed was not a calculated attack. It was something far more terrifying, a deadly game. The three orcas, driven by years of pent-up frustration and captivity and aggression, began toying with Keltie, pushing her, dragging her, tossing her between them like a rag doll. Each time she fought her way to the surface, desperate for a breath, they pulled her back under. Witness accounts paint a horrifying picture. The desperation in Keltie's eyes, the frantic gasps for air, the utter helplessness of the staff who could only watch as their beloved colleague was subjected to this brutal, underwater torment. There were no emergency protocols for this kind of event, no tranquilizers, no barriers strong enough to separate Keltie from the massive animals. Fragile setup had left everyone powerless. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Agonizing, helpless minutes as Keltie fought with every ounce of strength she possessed. But against 6-ton predators in their own element, human strength was meaningless. What started as a simple accident had spiraled into a fatal struggle. A nightmare unfolding in real time, right before their eyes. As the grim reality sunk in, the staff went into overdrive, throwing anything they could find into the pool. Life rings, rescue buoys, nets, poles, anything to distract the whales, to create a window of opportunity for Keltie to escape. But it was all in vain. The orcas seemed to ignore the commotion above, their focus unwavering, their prey secure, prey secure. Keltie resurfaced once more, coughing, choking, her arms flailing wildly towards the edge. And then, the moment that haunts those who witnessed it to this day, her voice, trembling with unimaginable terror, piercing the chaos. "I don't want to die." Those words, raw, desperate, final, hung in the air, a chilling testament to the horror unfolding in the pool. They were the last words Keltie Byrne would ever speak. Witnesses were paralyzed. Trainers stood frozen, their minds struggling to comprehend the scene playing out before them. The creatures they had trained, loved, and trusted were now mercilessly tormenting one of their own. Tilikum the giant would grip her in his jaws. Then one of the females would surge in, snatch her away, and drag her deeper into the water, only to repeat the cycle again and again. It wasn't a quick, decisive strike. It wasn't a single, fatal blow. It was a prolonged, agonizing struggle, a nightmarish dance of death beneath the frigid surface. For over 10 minutes, Keltie fought for her life. 10 minutes of sheer terror, of suffocating, of drowning, of being battered and dragged with no hope of escape. 10 minutes where every lifeline thrown her way sank beneath the weight of futility. And then the pool went still. The thrashing stopped. The surface calmed. The trainers could see her body floating, motionless, in the center of the tank. The orcas, seemingly exhausted from their macabre game, finally released her. But it was far too late. The young woman who had dedicated her life to these creatures, who had believed in their beauty and their grace, had become their victim. And in that moment, Sealand of the Pacific was forever stained with blood. By the time emergency personnel arrived, there was nothing they could do. Keltie had been submerged for far too long. There was no rescue, no miracle comeback. Her lifeless body was finally retrieved from the pool, battered, bruised, and broken. A vibrant, passionate young woman with a bright future, reduced to a tragic victim of captivity's unseen horrors. The trainers who had worked alongside her were in shock, their faces masks of disbelief and grief. Some wept uncontrollably. Others stood in a daze, replaying those terrifying minutes over and over in their minds. They had trained these whales. They had trusted them. But the cold, brutal reality was undeniable. The orcas had never been tamed. They had been contained. And when that containment failed, no humans stood a chance. The silence that followed Kelty Byrne's death was deafening. A stark contrast to the boisterous performances that had defined Sealand of the Pacific. The immediate aftermath was a masterclass in damage control. Sealand, a relatively small operation compared to the giants of the industry like SeaWorld, attempted to downplay the severity of the incident, framing it as a tragic accident, an unfortunate slip. The focus was subtly shifted from the orcas' behavior to Kelty's misstep. But the public, and more importantly, the media, weren't buying it. Questions swirled. What safety protocols were in place? Were the facilities adequate for containing such powerful creatures? Had there been warning signs that were ignored? The pressure mounted, and the illusion of control, of a harmonious relationship between humans and orcas, began to crumble. It became increasingly difficult to ignore the inherent risks of keeping these apex predators in captivity, confined to spaces that were a fraction of their natural habitat. Within months, Sealand of the Pacific closed its doors for good. The park, once a symbol of marine entertainment in British Columbia, became a haunting reminder of the consequences of prioritizing profit over animal welfare. But the story didn't end there. It simply shifted with the transfer of the orcas, particularly Tilikum, to SeaWorld Orlando. Tilikum, the largest of the three, already carrying the weight of Kelty's death, was moved across the continent to what was arguably the pinnacle of marine parks. SeaWorld, with its vast resources and sophisticated marketing machine, presented Tilikum as a rehabilitated gentle giant, a star attraction destined to wow audiences with his size and power. He was given a new stage, a new narrative, but the underlying reality remained unchanged. The trauma of captivity, the psychological toll of confinement, the suppressed aggression, none of that was addressed. It was simply masked by flashy performances, upbeat music, and the smiles of dedicated trainers. But the cracks were there, waiting to widen, and they did. In 1999, a man named Daniel Dukes, reportedly seeking an after-hours swim with Tilikum, snuck into the park and into the orca's tank. The next morning, he was found dead, his body severely mutilated. SeaWorld, predictably, labeled it a tragic accident, the result of the man's own reckless behavior. But whispers spread among the staff, doubts lingered. Was this another incident caused by the inherent dangers of keeping orcas in captivity? The answer became tragically clear on February 24, 2010. Dawn Brancheau, one of SeaWorld's most experienced and respected trainers, was performing with Tilikum during a Dine with Shamu show. In front of a live audience, the carefully constructed facade of control shattered once again. Tilikum, without warning, grabbed Dawn and pulled her into the water. What followed was horrific. For 45 minutes, he thrashed her body, refusing to release her, ultimately causing her death. This time, the world couldn't look away. The incident made global headlines, sparking outrage and reigniting the debate about orca captivity. The documentary Blackfish, released in 2013, further fueled the controversy, presenting a compelling and devastating case against SeaWorld's practices. The film explored the psychological damage inflicted on orcas in captivity, highlighting Tilikum's story as a prime example of the tragic consequences of keeping these intelligent and social creatures confined for entertainment. Blackfish became a cultural phenomenon, significantly impacting SeaWorld's attendance, reputation, and financial performance. The public began to question the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity, and the pressure on SeaWorld to change its practices became immense. While SeaWorld initially defended its practices, denying the claims made in Blackfish, the mounting public pressure eventually forced them to reconsider their business model. In 2016, SeaWorld announced that it would end its orca breeding program and phase out orca shows. This was a monumental shift, a direct consequence of the growing awareness of the inherent cruelty of orca captivity. But Keltie Burns' story wasn't just about SeaWorld and Tilikum. It was about the countless other animals that are held in captivity for entertainment, subjected to unnatural environments, and deprived of their natural behaviors. It was about the ethical responsibility we have to these creatures, the need to prioritize their well-being over our own amusement. Keltie's family, understandably, struggled with grief and the lack of accountability following her death. Were thrust into the center of a controversy they never asked for, forced to relive the tragedy every time Tilikum's story resurfaced. For them, Keltie was more than just a statistic, more than just a victim of orca captivity. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a promising young woman with a bright future. Her loss was a profound and personal tragedy, one that could never be fully healed. Keltie Burns' enduring legacy is not just as a victim, but as a symbol of the dangers of orca captivity and the exploitation of wild animals for entertainment. Her death served as a catalyst for change, sparking a global conversation about the ethics of keeping these magnificent creatures confined for our amusement. Her story reminds us that these are not performing seals. They are intelligent, emotional, and complex beings deserving of our respect and compassion. While the fight to end orca captivity is far from over, Keltie's legacy continues to inspire activists, researchers, and ordinary people to advocate for the welfare of these animals and to challenge the practices that prioritize profit over their well-being. Her name is a haunting reminder that silence has a price, and sometimes that price is a life. It's a price that shouldn't have had to be paid, and a reminder to us all of what can happen when we deny intelligent animals the right to live their own lives.